carnal, dice mi gente, la raza está abajo y tú estás indiferente. Prefieres cerrar los ojos, no vi nada. Estabas ocupado por andar en la tomada. Te gusta tirar el cruising todo el día, buscando a las mujeres como si el mundo acabaría. Pero no sabías que tú podías continuar tu educación para superarte en la vida. Hermano joven, levanta tu frente y siente el orgullo de ser un descendiente de los aztecas, los incas y los mayas. Ayúdame a pelear y vencer.
Antonio Díaz con su programa de Mestizo Experience. Estamos en el mes de octubre y como los que ya saben, hablamos sobre temas que afectan a la gente indígena al nivel global, internacional, nacional, estatal y local. Y pues este mes tenemos como siempre nuestra marcha de dignidad para gente indígena, los derechos humanos, aquí en San Antonio. Y el programa siempre es bilingüe, ya saben, y trilingüe, si al caso puedo introducir unas cuantas palabras en náhuatl o otra lengua. For those of you that have not seen this program before, it's a program targeting indigenous issues globally, internationally, nationally, and state and local. And in the month of October, as usual, we have our march here in San Antonio. And so for Indigenous Dignity Day Human Rights March. We've been doing this for 20 years now. And in 2015, San Antonio actually approved an ordinance recognizing October 12th as Indigenous Peoples Day here in San Antonio through our efforts of our organization, Texas Indigenous Council. And so you will see banners not totally swamping the city, but in the downtown core area and some in the northwest side. Basically to let people know that we exist and that we actually are starting to recognize, we ourselves are starting to recognize the fact that we are indigenous and not of other ethnicities that the colonial powers said we were, such as Hispanics. Even though I know in the month of September, it's Hispanic Heritage Month. But that, for an indigenous person, is like, to me, it would be like grabbing a German Jewish person and telling them that they were what is it? An Aryan German, which were the ones that killed them, right? So it would be the same thing as doing that to us. Les estoy diciendo que celebrando el mes de septiembre como el mes de hispanidad para gente indígena es como diciéndole a un judío alemán que tiene que celebrar los alemanes que los mataron a ellos. Y es lo mismo. Nosotros aquí celebramos que nos colonizaron los españoles, nos quitaron nuestras tierras, nuestra identidad y mataron a miles. Y en el mes de septiembre dicen, vamos a celebrar ahora que España vino y... Porque España esto no es España, aunque aquí eran 1500 con Cortés y los demás, esto se fue y se hizo Nuevo España, porque ellos conquistaron, para mí invadieron, ocuparon, pero todavía no han conquistado. Conquistan cuando nosotros hacemos esto de celebrar la colonización de nuestra gente. I go back and forth. It's bilingual, so if you get confused, it's because you haven't watched this program before. And if you're not bilingual, well then you'll totally be lost. But if you are, then you understand what I'm saying, whether you agree with me or not. That's another thing. I've been saying that for indigenous people, or those of us that recognize our fact that we have indigenous bloodlines, to celebrate that the colonizers imposed their culture on us, criminalized ours in order to colonize us, and now celebrating Hispanic month is a continued cultural genocide. Okay, that's what it is for indigenous people. Now, if you're from Spain, first, second, third generation, and you are Spanish, hey, celebrate your ethnicity and your month and your culture. But for a brown-skinned Mexican with maybe very little Spanish bloodline, to celebrate it is like I said, cultural genocide, because you're basically abandoning your roots and your ancestors. And even though here in the Southwest or Mexico, the Northwest of this continent, celebrating it in the way with the different things are not the way that, I mean, it's not Spain. It's still not Spain. So you drive around with the Mexican flag. The Mexican flag basically has the prophecy of the Mexica or the Azteca reaching Tenochtitlan, right? Which is the eagle devouring the serpent on the cactus. That was the prophecy from Huitzilopochtli to Tenoch, who guided, pretty much was the if you want to get into these things, pretty much the Moses for the Mexica, the Aztecs, right? Guiding them through years and years in the deserts and finally ending up in the Valley of Mexico, and putting chinampas and everything and creating Tenochtitlan, which the Spaniards destroyed in the 15th century. So that's why I say to celebrate that is lunacy. I mean, because I think at this point we're a little bit more educated and a little more free to express ourselves and say we were colonized 500 years ago, and we're able now to finally say that without getting killed, hung, or something, punished. Because again, the two revolutions in Mexico were basically led by indigenous people that were being treated in an inhumane way, being denied land rights, being treated as slaves in the encomienda system, all these things that went on. And that still, I mean, Mexico is still very impoverished, even though in the 14th and 15th century, it was one of the richest in the world, because everybody that came to trade, and not invade, traded for the chile, traded for the tomate, traded for you name it that was here. The potatoes all came from here. I mean, I might have been a little bit more into the mountainous area of Central America, but still, from here, all these foodstuffs, the aguacate, which is the avocado, the cacahuate, the peanut, all these things that are from here, the mangoes, all the papayas, all these good foods from here. We were not starving. We were not waiting for the Spaniards to come and feed us. We fed them, and all these foods were taken out. And we are acculturated, right? Because our people assume they're Spanish and celebrate Spanish Heritage Month, even though they may have very, very little Spanish blood. And all that is intentional, right? To acculturate us. Because we were not supposed to continue on, but we're here. And finally, now we're able to, I guess, dissect the history. Like I was just talking about the encomienda system, about the first revolution in 1810, which set up Mexico, but still as a monarchy, and then 1821, finally becoming a republic. But all these were still under control of Spaniards, right? Whether they be peninsulares or not, they were Spaniards. So mestizos and natives were sort of outcasts. We finally, now, like I'm saying, in October, which is why here in San Antonio, it's been 20 some odd years now of pressing the issue on Indigenous identity, on Indigenous Dignity Day, Indigenous Peoples Day, and so we do our march, and we bring up these issues, and we bring up local issues, such as the Coahuiltecos or whatever, Carrizos, whoever wants to say that dominated the area, Comanches, Kiowas, Lipan, all these native people that have lived here. We try to bring up issues that still are impacting their lives, our lives, by this government. And one of the issues is the continued honoring of genocide of indigenous people by these governments, be that Spain, New Spain, the Mexican Republic, the Texas Republic, which was a slave nation. Okay, you look up the Texas Republic, look up their preamble, look up their constitution, and what you're going to find is that it was set up as a slave nation for slave owners to continue importing slaves for their labor. Okay. Now, after the Civil War between the Europeans that set up what they call the United States, okay, because they're Europeans from wherever you want to say, whatever European nation, white Anglos, white whatever, it was a white supremacy that set up this government of the United States that went to war with each other. And here in Texas, Coahuila, which is what New Spain called it, still trying to adapt some of the native word, which is Coahuila. Texas was cado, a cado word for roof or for friend. All this is history, right? But to still continue to try to celebrate genocide is what really gets to me, and I have to oppose it. So placing another monument that celebrates the genocide of indigenous people, the eradication, the incarceration, the separation of families, which goes on at the border, okay? But this was going on here since Spain arrived in the 16th and 17th century, and then onward through the Texas Republic into the 19th century, pre-Civil War, post-Civil War, and post-Civil War here in San Antonio, in what we call Yanaguana, because it once was a lake until the Spaniards drained it to use it to be able to make what they call acequias or creeks that went into the San Antonio River to wash out whatever waste they were creating. Yanaguana or San Pedro Lake or whatever you want to call it, San Pedro Creek, all that area is where the most of the native people gathered around because of the lake, of the pure water that came up from the springs that have been kept more and more in modern times. So recognizing history, yes, African or African Americans, if you want to call them, by then in the 1860s, post-Civil War, had basic training on a month of June unto, from April unto June, so like 3 months, basic training there. One time only. It was not continued. One time for 3 months. But guess what they were trained for? It's like, again, during Vietnam, for those that are still alive of that era, what really angered everybody was that they were sending mainly brown and black young men to go and kill Asiatic people in Thailand and Cambodia and Vietnam, right? Until all the protesting and all that, and then once Anglos, white people started getting killed, their white sons started getting killed, then is when the war was really, they said, let's bring everybody back. But as long as it was black and brown, it was okay, which we were the majority. I say that because post-Civil War, here, you still had Comanches, Kiowas, Lipanes, even Coahuiltecos that were still trying to fight and protect their land. Because the Spaniards, while they encroached and built their missions and all that, and did colonize certain areas did not go out against those that resisted more, such as the Comanches that had moved into the area, the Apaches, such as the Lipanes, or they called it, left it alone, called it Comancherias or Apacherias, and just left them alone. And as long as the Comanches or Apaches left them alone significantly, there was no animosity, no actual warfare. Now, when the Texas Republic moved in, and especially under Mayor Boulomar, he created a legislation that there were no Texas Indians left in Texas, which means if you're an Indian, you're dead, or you're going to be run out. And after that, post-Civil War, the United States didn't change their policy. The United States continued that same policy. So post-Civil War of 1866, 1867, when the Buffalo Soldiers were created here in Texas, they were sent out pursuing what they called the hostiles, right? But a village of old men and women and children can only resist so much. And those were the ones that were being targeted, killed, or chased out and dying in the desert or whatever, or being in prison. And so to tell me that we're to accept a statue or a monument of $400,000 in San Pedro Springs Park, Yanaguana, to see forevermore, no matter how if you don't really know your history, I guess you're okay with it. But I know my history. And I'm not okay with it. And I'm protesting it. It's not up yet. So I'm trying to get the Historical Commission, our commissioners, our city, to find a way to say, no, let's put it up in a military base. And I'd like to even suggest Camp Bullis, because one of these Buffalo soldiers, black cavalry soldiers, rescued a young Lieutenant Bullis during the Civil War, when the Confederates had him under fire. That young black sergeant or whatever got wounded rescuing that white lieutenant, and got the Medal of Honor. So Camp Bullis would be perfect, right? But not our park, because again, even though it might, if you're just a nationalist and you don't care about human rights or who got displaced or who did genocide upon whom or what, if you don't care about that and you're just a nationalist, well, you're going to support the United States military, because especially here we have 5 bases. But I've been for human rights for 30 some odd years, and especially for indigenous human rights from where my roots are. And so to see another monument to a military unit that went out and was distinguished for being able to track and kill Native Americans is something that I don't want to see. I don't want to see that. So put it in a military base. Put it somewhere else, but not there. Because even recently, now I can't move around as much as I used to, but just last year, a couple of years ago, we were still doing ceremony there, still doing danza there. So for our younger people, I'd like for them to still go there and not have to see a statue to a military unit that used to hunt Native people down. So I'm opposing it. And like I said, I'm contacting the various historical commissions, committees, and commissioners to stop this. Now, the Governor Abbott's office, just this year, approved a resolution that Texas recognizes, I think, the second weekend of October as Indigenous Peoples Day, which is a great move, especially for a Republican, an Anglo-Republican. Great move. But now, if I have to go that high, I guess, since he's now considering us worthy of a resolution to recognize that we exist in Texas, not like the Texas Republic that said no Indians of Texas left in Texas, we're going to kill you all. That's an improvement. So maybe I should bring this up to him and say the Buffalo Soldiers were used for this. And I know it was still racist, because they didn't want to send white soldiers that might get killed by a native person defending their land. So instead, why not send a recently black freedman to go and risk his life trying to kill an Indian to remove him from his land? You see how that plays? Do you see how that plays? I do. And it's still racist. We're going to send the next slave that used to labor in the fields here, that we're offering the what was it then? The mule and the 40 acres. Well, whose 40 acres do you think they belong to? Not the Anglos. The Anglos hadn't even moved here. It was us, our native land. So yeah, I guess an ex-freed man or a freedman, ex-slave, would say, I'm going to get a mule and 40 acres. All I got to do is kill some Indians. If I survive, yeah. Because what had the black community survived up to then? Slavery. So yeah, I can see it. But it's time to put that to an end. It's time to put it to an end. So I'm contacting our local government. And if you support the direction I'm trying to take this in, you can call them up too. Just look them up on the phone, look them up on your phone, the directory. They're there, here in the county or in the state, and let them know. It's time to stop all this honoring of one race trying to wipe out another just for some land. We native people still don't have any land rights on our land, other than those that are in reservations, because our identity, it doesn't mean anything. We're finally, like I said, here in San Antonio, and since 2015, we've had Indigenous Peoples Day. But I've had to basically drag our local government kicking and screaming in order to get anything from them to recognize it. But now maybe since the Republican governor approved a resolution statewide, we'll get more from the local government, right? Which it appears we got more for our banners this year, except that our local government still dragged their feet long enough to where the monies that were allocated for our banners are not able to be used for the banners because it's time sensitive, right? If we didn't get it done by a certain date. So this guy that was controlling the funds today, today, okay, which we are, the 5th, 7 days away from our march, and the people that put up the banners, it can't make up another couple of banners and put them up because time ran out. And this guy just barely today let me know that, oh, you have an excess amount. If he had done it last week, even just as much as last week, it may have been possible. See, so these are the things that I put up with as an activist and an organizer for Indigenous human rights. You might say, well, you don't do that much. No, what I'm doing is putting us in the forefront. Because I believe from us having achieved this in 2015, it made others also embolden other Indigenous peoples in the state of Texas, whether it be in El Paso, Corpus, Dallas, to also press on, and Houston, and which is why the governor approved a resolution. It's not legislation, it's just a resolution as far as the state is concerned. But here in San Antonio, it is legislation. It's an ordinance. So we got this 6 years ago. And so come out to the march next week on the 12th. We were trying to stay on the 12th, which is a weekday. So, and the hours are kind of not, but since COVID, yeah, we're still dealing with COVID. A lot of people are still not fully employed, still not going to I am, but others are not. I've taken those days off, by the way. Whether they give them to me off or not, I'm taking them off. And then I guess I can look for another job. But, again, that's what, as an activist, I've done for the last 30-some-odd years. Placed myself in economically disadvantaged situations to be able to get done what needs to be done as far as my vision of promoting Indigenous human rights and Indigenous identity in my local area. So come to the march. Also, like I said, this is the first time in Austin. They'll be doing it this Saturday. If you're able to see this program before this coming Saturday, theirs is on the 9th. Try and attend that one. Theirs is more of a celebration. Ours, while we do celebrate at the end of the march, during the march, we're still bringing up issues that impact our community in a bad way, right? In an adverse way. Like I'm just saying, we still have a lot of Native people at the border in tents, children dying, being exposed to all sorts of weather conditions, extreme weather conditions. Recently, we've had people from Haiti because of the earthquakes over there. Also, and the people from Haiti is another thing, because originally there were nothing but Taínos there. Taínos, okay? Caribe. They got all wiped out by Columbus, okay? Enslaved and died from smallpox and all that. So African slaves were imported into those areas. Haiti means the land of mountains in Taíno. So you have earthquakes, right? And they're suffering. And they're over here trying to also find a place here. And some have not. But that also puts me in the mind of, and our Native people, that we should cross freely. And that's the one thing of our organization of Texas Indigenous Council that we keep pushing for, is migration rights of Indigenous people. We should have an intercontinental ID card. So we shouldn't have to cross those deserts, families drowning with their children, crossing that river that are Indigenous people. When is that going to end? See, I hope to see it in my lifetime. Maybe not, but I would like to see an intercontinental ID for Indigenous people from Argentina to Alaska, that we able to again migrate as our ancestors used to. Why shouldn't we be able to rent, lease, or own anywhere in the continent? Why shouldn't we be able to educate ourselves or have a job, look for a vocation anywhere on this continent? I'm not asking to take back all the minerals, all the wealth, all the raw resources that all these invaders and occupier governments have taken away from our people. I'm not asking for that. I'm not asking for the trillions and trillions of dollars that are stolen from our people. All I'm asking is that we stop being persecuted, that we stop being criminalized. These national borders don't pertain to us. As we say, we didn't cross the borders crossed us. It's one of our chants in our march this coming Tuesday. Indigenous Dignity Day Human Rights March. It may be long, but you can remember Indigenous Peoples Day, which also is on Tuesday. No hablé mucho español porque todavía ahorita ando medio calentado con esta idea que tenemos que celebrar la hispanidad cuando no somos hispanos. Hablamos la idioma, no somos hispanos. Tlazocamati, thank you. Gracias for watching this program. Continue watching Mestizo Experience. Antonio Díaz, Tosticate.
¿Qué onda, carnal? Dice mi gente, la raza está abajo y tú estás indiferente. Prefieres cerrar los ojos, no vi nada. Estabas ocupado por andar en la tomada. Te gusta tirar el cruising todo el día, buscando a las mujeres como si el mundo acabaría. Pero no sabías que tú podías continuar tu educación para superarte en la vida. Hermano joven, levanta tu frente y siente el